Hey friends, Hannah here, and I'm so excited to record this video. It's weird like speaking in English, so just stay with me, but I'm excited to record this video and share with you guys a little bit about our story here in Rio and all that God has done these last 4.5 years that we've lived here. I'm calling this our all or nothing story because it truly is a story of radical faith that we've lived these last 4.5 years, and I pray that it encourages you. And like my husband always says, I pray that our story will be so impactful, so moving, that it will get you off your butt and doing something for the kingdom of God. And so I'm just kind of like, just go straight into it. So stay with me. I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope it encourages you, and I really do hope it lights a fire in your heart. So kind of just starting from the beginning, my name is Hannah. I'm 27 years old. I am an American by birth, a Canadian by blood, a Mexican by life experience, and a Brazilian at heart. And to kind of just explain that to you guys, I was born in the United States. My mom is American, my dad's Canadian. And when I was 5 years old, my parents sat me and my brother and sister down on the couch and told us God's spoken to us, and we are moving to Mexico City to start a church. And so at 5 years old, we became missionaries. We left everything we had in the States and we moved to Mexico City, where my parents started and opened a church, which continues today, 23 years later. And so I grew up on the mission field. I grew up bilingual, bicultural, tacos al pastor, enchiladas, chilaquiles, horchata, café de loya. Oh my gosh, like Mexico has amazing food. So I'm a Mexican at heart, and so I grew up in Mexico. I grew up on the mission field. I grew up serving in church. I grew up loving the Lord. So kind of jumping forward, at 16 years old, I remember a very specific night in my life when the Lord spoke to me and told me that I would live for Him. I would live for the ministry. I would not be pursuing any secular job or any profession, that I would literally give my life to the Lord. And I remember it was during a worship rehearsal one night. It was like a Thursday night. We were having worship rehearsal. I was on the worship team singing as a backup vocal. And I remember we were worshiping. I can't remember what song we were singing, but I remember as we were rehearsing, we were worshiping. We were, just worshiping the Lord. And in the middle of the song, I remember the Lord speaking so clearly to me at 16 years old. He said to me, "Hannah, you will do this for the rest of your life," referencing worshiping and serving Him. And I just knew in that moment that the Lord was telling me, I'm going to cry because it's so personal, but in that moment, the Lord was telling me that my life was His, and I would serve Him forever. And so right there in the middle of rehearsal, I just broke down crying. I got on my knees. I thanked Him, and from the age of 16, I knew that my life would be His. I knew that even if I were going to go off to college or whatever I would do, it would be in service to Christ. And so that was like 16 years old, and was in high school. And oh gosh, sorry guys. At 17 years old, I was a junior in high school. In the year 2008, I met the man who is now the love of my life, my husband, the father of my children, Joshua Todd Adams. We met one summer, the summer of 2008. Oh my gosh, a big group is coming over here. Again, I'm at the airport, so just ignore them. We'll keep talking because it's going really good and I don't want to stop it. But in 2008, we met in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we fell in love pretty quickly. Sorry, it's awkward having people around when you're recording in a public space. We met in 2008. And we really quickly fell in love. And what we were so attracted to about each other was just our really passionate and zealous love for the Lord. I remember the first time I saw Joshua, it was during worship at church, and I remember he was a couple rows in front of me, and I remember seeing him, and he's like just worshiping God unashamed, like just all in, like no holding nothing back. And I remember seeing him, and I'm just like, man, that's a man. Like, that's a man of God. And I remember thinking that, and the Holy Spirit whispered to me, that's going to be your husband. And I'm 17 at this time, so I'm like, okay, we'll see about that. But sure enough, we got together and we fell in love pretty quickly. And I was going into my senior year of high school, and so we spent a year just kind of doing long distance relationship and talking over the phone and Messenger and Skype. Back in the day, it was all about Skype, and so we fell in love with each other really quickly, and we knew we were going to get married, and we knew that we both had a heart for ministry for the Lord, and that we wanted to serve Him. And so we just started talking about that and talking about what our life would be and how that would look and how it would all play out. And so we just started dating in 2008, and I have like notes here, so let me fast forward here. We started dating in 2008, and soon after I graduated high school, I moved to the United States. I moved back to the United States, and I attended Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma. And Josh was living in Oklahoma at the time, and so we were able to be close to each other. And I studied communication at Oral Roberts University, and with a minor in public relations and advertising. But I did it knowing that whatever I was going to study, I was going to use for ministry. And so that's why I pursued communications, because I knew it would help me in whatever ministerial endeavor we would pursue. And as I was in Tulsa, and as we were in the States, and as our relationship was growing, we just started like planning for whatever the Lord had for us. And we were young. When we met, I was 17, he was 20, and we would buy these like notebooks or these like binders with paper, and we'd go to Starbucks, and we would spend hours at Starbucks. Like we would just ask for like a cup of water because we were so poor. We were college kids, right? We would spend hours at Starbucks planning and casting vision for what the Lord had for our lives. At first we thought we were going to be evangelists. We were going to travel the world and save thousands. But as we matured and as we just prayed that out, the Lord really revealed to us that we were to be pastors and we were to start a church. And even though we were Americans, we knew from the beginning our church would never be in the United States. We would never plant it in the United States. That God had something for us elsewhere. And so the years were passing, and we dated, and I was finishing up college, and we started really seriously considering where we would start this church. And so it was around that time, I think it was 2010, when Ryan, my husband, has a twin brother, his name's Ryan, when Ryan started dating a Brazilian gal and moved to Brazil. And her name is Jessica. Hi, Jay. And when he came to Brazil, he calls his brother, Ryan calls Joshua in Tulsa, and he's like, Joshua, we were meant to be Brazilians. Like, we were born in the wrong country to a wrong people. We were supposed to be Brazilians. Brazil is our country. Brazilians are our people. You have to come to Brazil. And so sure enough, Josh visited Brazil, and when he got here, he calls me, and he's like, Hannah, I believe that God has something for us here in Brazil. And so then we just started praying about like where in Brazil. We didn't know anything about Brazil. But the funny thing is, when I was in 4th grade in Mexico, I had a teacher, a music teacher, who at the end of every music class would have us, in order for us to leave or like to dismiss us, he would have us count in Portuguese. So like he would go around the room and we'd have to say the next number in Portuguese, like 1, 2, 3, and if we said it right, then we could leave. If we said it wrong, you'd have to wait till we go around again to learn how to count in Portuguese. And I remember that so clearly from 4th grade, and I remember, I don't know how old I was in 4th grade, but since 4th grade, I always had a desire to learn Portuguese. I thought it was a beautiful language. It was so poetic and romantic. And I always had a desire to learn Portuguese. And so the fact that the Lord brought that back around, planting us in Brazil is pretty supernatural. And so my husband gets here, and we start praying about where in Brazil we were to plant our church. And at this time, we were engaged by this time, and we had already had our church name, Igreja United, which means United Church. We already had the vision, reach, build, and empower. we had spent those hours and hours at Starbucks planning what would our kids ministry look like, how were we going to receive our first time guests, what kind of worship were we going to have, what kind of a vibe would our church have, what do we want people to experience when they come through our doors. And we're sitting there in Starbucks with no volunteers, with no vision, no church, not vision, but nothing physical in front of us, yet we had everything in our hearts and written down, and we had written the vision and we were ready to run with it. And so he visited Brazil and he calls me, and he got invited to speak at a church in Rio. And when he got to Rio, the Lord spoke to him and said, this is your city, these are your people, this is where you have to open Igreja United. And he calls me again and he says, Hannah, Rio's our city, so let's get ready to move here. And this was in 2011. And we were engaged, getting ready to get married. I was about to graduate ORU. And time goes on, and a pastor here in Rio met Josh and found out who we were and about our heart for ministry. And he invited us to be associate pastors at their church here in Rio. And it came with a great salary, with the promise of an apartment and a car and all these things. And we thought, this is the hand of God. This is God opening up a door for us to be in Brazil and start our ministry. And so we accepted the position. We announced to everyone, we're moving to Brazil to be associate pastors. And we hadn't even gotten married yet. And the plan was get married, go on our honeymoon, move to Brazil. And so we even told everyone that we invited to our wedding, don't buy us gifts because we can't take it to Brazil with us. Can you give us money and we'll be able to buy things there? And so we were getting ready to get married, getting ready to move, working on all the paperwork to move. And 3 months before our wedding, Joshua had spent some time in prayer, and the Lord spoke to him so clearly, Joshua, that's not what I have for you. I didn't tell you to accept that position. In fact, I have planned for your start in ministry to be by faith. And accepting that position is not by faith, because that's easy. And it was kind of like, oh, Lord, that hurts. But we knew it was right. And he told me, and as hard as it was for me to hear, because I'm such a planner and I like to prepare things, and we're 3 months away from our wedding and we have now no future or no plan, but we knew it was right. And so we called the pastor, we thanked him for the opportunity and apologized, but we didn't end up taking the job. And so we got married, went on our honeymoon, and came back to Tulsa with no home, no apartment, no furniture, nothing, and just asked the Lord what to do. And so we decided to spend another year in Tulsa. And so we spent, after already having Rio and this church burning in our heart, we spent one more year in the United States just waiting for God to give us the green light, okay, go. And so we spent that year praying, we spent that year preparing, we spent that year hammering out all the details in regards to the vision that God had given us for this church, and just waiting on the Lord. And it was in March of 2013 that one night my husband was praying, and he prays past midnight, 4 a.m. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. He was in the living room praying, and I was asleep, of course, in the other room. And the Lord told him, okay, Josh, now's the time. And Josh was like, now? Now? And God's like, yes, now is the time to go and to start this church. And so he woke me up and he's like, Hannah, God spoke to me and said that it's time for us to go and to move and to get this going. And I was with him. It's insane what faith really does to you and to your heart and to the way you live. You kind of just live on the edge all the time, but there's just the supernatural peace knowing that it's right and that it's God, and so you're okay, you just keep going for it. And so the very next day we started selling all of our things on Craigslist, literally everything in our home, which had been brand new because we had just gotten married 7 months prior. We started selling. Sold our sofa, sold our couch, sofa and couch, sofa, bed, everything. We sold it all. Within a month, our apartment was empty. and we moved in with some dear friends of ours to kind of just save money in preparation for the move. This was in March of 2013, and we moved in with our friends Philip and Sarah, and they so graciously opened their home to us, and we were getting ready to move in October. So we had about 6 or 7 months to save money, to work, to get everything ready to be in Brazil and by faith start this church. And so during that time, we got pregnant. We got pregnant with our first baby. And most people would probably be like, well, I'll wait another year, have the baby here, and then, then I'll go. But we had already bought our tickets, and God had already spoken, so the plans and the plans didn't change. We kept going, and people thought we were absolutely insane, which we really were. I don't know what we were doing at the time, but we were living by faith, and we just had a word from the Lord, and we just knew it was time to go. We didn't know what waited for us in Brazil. We didn't have a home, we didn't have jobs, we didn't have salaries. All we had was $8,000 saved in our account, and that would have lasted us about 8 months in Brazil. And then, who knows? New baby on the way, no hospital, no doctor, no health care. But when God says go, you just go. You just do it. You don't ask questions. So October 2013 came. I was 7 months pregnant when we got on the one-way flight to Rio. We moved with 14 suitcases full of what was left of the house sale that we had, and we moved to Brazil. We knew one person here in Brazil. His name is Rodrigo. He is one of our pastors today at our church. And we moved here by faith. Again, we had nothing. We had no promise of any success whatsoever. But we just knew God had called us. We knew we had to open this church. We knew we couldn't wait. So we got here, and if I were to tell you every miracle of all that God did for us, this video would probably be hours long. But I'll try to give you the best ones. Within a week after moving here, we had the keys to our own apartment, which was supernatural because the owner of this apartment, his lawyer told him, this couple doesn't have the right documentation, don't rent your apartment to them, I advise against it. And the owner, who's not a believer, told us, my lawyer told me not to rent my apartment to you, but I just feel like I should, and so I will. And he did. And within a week, we had the keys to a home. And we walk into that house, we crash on the floor and just cry out, thanking God for his goodness and his mercy. A month after that, we were invited to speak at a church here in Rio, some dear pastor friends of ours. And that night at the service, the Lord put on the pastor's heart to pay our rent for a year. Soon after that, someone offered their medical services so that I could have my baby. They got me an incredible discount at one of the best hospitals in our city. Just miracle after miracle. A dear family wrote us a check for $10,000 so that we could buy a car, so that we wouldn't have to go on buses and metros with a brand new baby. I mean, God does amazing things when you step out in faith. And so we moved here in October, all those things happened, and from October to January, we started sharing the vision and just randomly posting on social media, hey, we're starting a church. Anyone want to be a part of this crazy faith idea and project? And people just started coming out of the woodwork saying hey, I want to be a part. Hey, I want to help. What can I do? And by January, we had a group of 20 people meeting in our tiny apartment where for 4 months we shared the vision that we had for years written and prepared. We shared the vision about our church, how the church is going to operate, how we're going to receive kids and new people and all that stuff. And so we shared that with them, and we trained them in it, and we prepared them for it. And in May of 2014, we rented out a theater with 160 seats, and for the first time publicly opened Igreja United. And by the grace and mercy of God, we packed that theater on our very first night. Over 160 people showed up, and Josh and I look at each other like, where did these people come from? But what's amazing is we never, in the history of our church, have never been under 160. For a good solid year, 160 was our number, and it's only grown from there. And in that first year of our church, it was a lot of faith. Our very first service, we only received 200 reais, which is the currency here in Brazil, in offerings, but our rent was 2,500. And we're like, okay, Lord, we had a church for one day, and then, we'll see how it goes after that. But he just kept providing for more things after that. I'm going to run because this is like a 20-minute video already. But in that first year, we faced a lot of difficulties. We were young pastors. We were just on fire, and we just wanted to do. And that caused a couple problems within our church, and people were having trouble with different things, and we just faced a lot of difficulties with some of our team members. And so unfortunately, within the first year of our church, we almost had a church split where half of our leadership team left our church, half of our pastoral team left our church, and it left us really broken and really depressed, to be honest. We really faced some serious depression. By this point, I was already pregnant with our second child, and I just prayed every day, Lord, don't let my sadness and my mourning affect this baby. And so that was 2015, and August of 2015, God did something supernatural, because we traveled to the United States to a missions conference in Oklahoma called Fire for the Nations. And when we traveled there, we told the Lord, God, we're not going back to Brazil because we don't want to live this life of heartache and of gossip and of division. And that's not why we moved to Brazil. God, so sorry, but we're not going back, kind of thing. We were pretty broken. And when we traveled to Tulsa that year, my husband and I, we said a prayer, and we said to the Lord, if you want us to go back, we need two things. Number one, we need hope, and number two, we need $50,000. And again, guys, we have insane faith, and I love that, because you just need it. You need this insane faith. And we was like, Lord, we need $50,000 because we've been renting out an auditorium for a year, and we need the money to be able to rent a fixed location and renovate it and make it our church. And so one night my husband said that prayer, and just by faith, he got it. And that's what faith is. It's having something before you physically see it. And he got it by faith, and he came running into the room, Hannah, we got $50,000. And I'm like, where's it? And he's like, we just got it by faith. God gave us $50,000. And 2 weeks later, we go to this missions conference. Pastor Sam Carr gets up and by the Holy Spirit says, there's a couple in Brazil who need $50,000. I'm going to cry again. And as a church, we're going to raise it for them right now. And he goes, I'm going to give 1,000, and our church is going to give 1,000. But if anyone here wants to give 1,000, stand up right now, and we're going to bless this family. And within 10 seconds, he counts out of the people standing over $60,000. And if you know anything about my husband or I, you know that we were dancing, we were running, we were crying, we were rejoicing. God had done a miracle. And not only the money was secondary, because what he had done prior to that moment was given us hope that it will be okay and that he will be with us, because he called us and he provided for us. And so we took that money, came back to Brazil, got a location, renovated the location, and our church just began to flourish. People started coming, it started growing. The following year, we opened our second campus in another area of the city. The following year, we opened our third campus in another area of the city. 2 months ago, we opened our fourth campus. In 4 years of Igreja United here in Rio, we have, by the grace of God, opened 4 campuses where today we have the immense privilege and honor of ministering to and serving over 1,500 people in our city amongst all of our campuses. That is God. I did not do that. My husband did not do that. God did that. And he did that because of our radical faith, because we stepped out in obedience and in absolute surrender. And today we are living supernatural things. I mean, after that night with the $60,000, God has done miracle after miracle in our church. He has provided in ways that I've probably forgotten, and I'm going to ask the Lord to remind me of all the ways that He has provided. And so today, we continue here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Igreja United is growing. It is thriving. We have amazing pastors. We have amazing leaders. Our church is reaching its neighborhood. It is building the lost, and it is empowering believers with the Word and with the Spirit. And if this video touched you at all, and if you got to this point, 25 minutes, know that if God can do that with two crazy young Americans who just want to be obedient, how much more can He do with you? Wherever you are in the world, whether in the United States or wherever, how much more can He do with you and with your radical faith and with your all or nothing attitude? And I pray this encouraged you. If you ever want to come visit us, come visit us. Come see what God is doing here in Brazil, because I know it will bless you. And I know that you will leave changed, and you will leave touched and blessed. And amen. That's it. Love you guys. I'm going to shut off because this is so long, but I pray you guys were blessed, and